Awesome. Hi, ladies.
Hey,
Hello, ladies.
I was gonna go sit beside the fireplace with our fireside chat, but
I know.
I really was.
I'm cold where I am right now, so I should have went and grabbed a cup of coffee before we started, at least. But yes.
Well, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to come together as really just kind of girlfriends on this conversation. We have had such a tremendous journey together over the past few years, in different ways, in different aspects, serving in different roles. But here we are, all serving the ecosystem that exists around this very specific topic. So, ladies, I am honored to be in this conversation with you, even without the fireplace.
We can make it work.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Um, and as I see, we still have folks that are coming in and joining the session. So as folks are joining and hopefully will become a part of this conversation, I guess we should definitely start by just kind of introducing ourselves and, who we are, what's our background, and perhaps why, as I alluded, why this specific topic is of interest to you. As Valarie reminded us, we needed to make sure we bring that into this conversation and like what our past experiences have been that have also formulated, our commitment to this space. So, Kristina, why don't we start with you?
Sure, sure. So I'm super excited to be a part of this conversation with you two. Errika, as you mentioned, our paths have all crossed in some way, shape, or form. I feel very divinely. Even though we're kind of doing our own things now, it's good to come back together and just talk about, as you mentioned, the ecosystem. For those of you who are joining, my name is Christina Newton, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization called Hype. We empower girls, particularly underrepresented girls historically in tech, with tech education and significant experiences to help them form positive associations between themselves and who they can be and what they can accomplish in STEM and computing specifically. This topic today is personal to me because my background is in computer engineering. And so I've experienced, 15 years ago, what a lot of people still today are experiencing when it comes to not feeling prepared, not feeling included or confident about myself and my skills as a tech professional in corporate America. Having what I believe all of the capability and all of the training necessary, and still experiencing that it wasn't enough once I actually entered into a career. And so my personal experiences led to me starting Hype. It led to my nonprofit organization journey. And, it's why I'm here today to really talk about what we can do to help ensure that my experience isn't the same for girls who are coming, 5 or 10 years down the line.
Excellent. Yeah, my my story is similar, right? And it's funny because our stories are similar and probably a decade apart from each other. And then we're here at the same place. Before I get started, I just wanted to remind people, if you're joining the session, you can control your format. So if you see the closed caption in a bigger window and that's fine with you, then perfect. If you want to see things differently, you can just double click on that window and it'll change the size of the window that you see. So just a little housekeeping stuff as we get started. So I am very interested in this topic and getting more girls and women in computing because I was an engineer. So as an engineer major, when I went to do internships, my internship in co-op was at General Electric aircraft engines. and I was on the aircraft engine floor where they made it. So my job was kind of to help increase efficiency of how aircraft engines were built. So picture aircraft engine mechanics. This is where I work. So of course, men there. And then the engineers that work with them are generally men. And so trying to figure out how to maneuver that was difficult. I found myself wearing khakis and polo shirts just because that was around, right? That's what I saw. And then, and now I know that I didn't have to do that, right? But that's you imitate what you see. And then, fast forward, I went to consulting. So I started with Ernst & Young Consulting and doing that whole travel consulting thing for, about 7 years. And again, mostly men are in the consulting world. And I wanted to see that a little differently. Went to Coca-Cola. I spent 12 years at Coca-Cola as a technology leader there. And while I love technology and was always interested in the solutions, I started looking at the things that I had noticed and how can I change the environment of what I wanted to see more. So as I started to work still the global transformation projects and making sure that I had the responsibility in climbing this ladder, so to speak, I switched my interest to what I really had a passion around. That was building teams that were more diverse and more inclusive of all types of demographics. And with that, about 4 years ago, I left that environment to start my company, Right Now Solutions. And at Right Now Solutions, we're really focused on building more equity in education and careers. And I know that strong leadership starts with a strong foundation. So if I look at the leadership level, I don't see as much diversity as I would like to see, and diverse in a whole lot of ways. Definitely women because I'm a woman, but different ethnic groups, different backgrounds, different educational levels. So my goal when I started Right Now Solutions was to boost that equity and starting with the foundation, starting with youth groups, starting with girls, so we can see, and boys, because I have a girl and a boy, I have to watch out for both, letting them see what careers would be like, making sure they had the skills to be there, and then going on to higher ed and making sure that they were actually ready to pursue that corporate career. I mean, I found when I was doing internships for programs for Coca-Cola, or even when I went on my own intern, I didn't really know what to do. They didn't really teach me that. They taught me a technical skill, but I wasn't really prepared. So I wanted to make sure when I started this company that we made sure people were absolutely prepared to go to this next level in their career or to start that business that they wanted to start. And continuing with that cycle, once we get to those levels, we have to make sure we are prepared to go to that next level, prepared to be a visionary, prepared to be a trailblazer. So it doesn't stop. Like, we have to encourage each other at every step of the way and learn more and more. And I mean, that's why I'm here. I want to see us grow. I want to see us be equipped and raised to go to the top of the levels. Errika, we want to hear yours.
We share, right, this common thread of all being engineers and all having that perspective as the foundational element and the launching pad for us. And I've told this story 50 million times. So for anybody that's in this conversation that's heard before, I'm going to apologize. But I emphasize it because I think it's necessary, because reality is it was only 1993 when this was exposed to me, in terms of I had a circuits professor who told me that Black women have no business in engineering. And as, traumatizing as that statement was at that time, or really could have been if I had allowed it to resonate with me, it became, quite honestly, a launching pad and perspective for, this is what I need to be prepared for, quite honestly. So when we talk about why we're here, yes, it's 2021. But even in 2021, I recognize that some of the demystifying, right, some of the aspects of what it takes to pursue engineering, to pursue computer science, to have that perseverance, to have that self-motivation, those are the types of experiences that, unfortunately, girls in this space, girls, young women, grown professional women, can still and will experience in this environment. So it's everything from the perspective of how are we preparing them, energizing them, motivating them, empowering them in the K through 16 space. And then how are we then taking that and launching them into their career pathways, right? Because what do we know? We know that statistically, we are still anomalies in this space. Statistically, we're still below 20%, particularly when you talk about underrepresented women and girls in this space. We are under 20%. So in terms of still having a long runway of making change and creating improvements and opportunities, we have to do what we can. And that's what the three of us have been about for so long, whether it's been in our careers or whether it's been more recently in the things that we are now engaged in and that we're passionate about and that we support, right? I currently serve as the inaugural executive director for an organization called STEM Funders Network, which in and itself is a 9-year-old organization. But the reality is it's only a couple of years ago that they made the definitive choice that we want to be a sustainable organization. We want to be an organization that will continue to be committed to creating equity and STEM education access and opportunities. And what that meant was we need to bring on a permanent leader to be able to drive that for us. I feel very blessed to serve in this role because it is literally a culmination of, similar to you all, right? My path, experiences, and journeys. I worked for IBM as an account executive. I could literally count on one hand the number of Black account executives in IBM, specifically in the industry that I supported, oil and gas. And there were only 2 of us that were Black females of that 5, right? Went on to work for BMC Software. And again, I had the fortune, I will absolutely say, I had the fortune of being in spaces and places where I had mentors, both white and Black, both male and female. But this conversation is about, again, taking it from a curriculum all the way through a professional career pathway. What if a student doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
So thus our conversation today.
Yeah.
How do we make it different for them? How do we operate as we always do, as change agents and catalysts for empowering and dropping that knowledge, right? In terms of, for these young ladies that are in middle school, that are in high school, that are making their first year matriculations into college. What are solutions, ladies, what are solutions and programming that you see to mitigate some of these challenges? We've spent a great conversation at this point talking about what the challenges are and what we've seen personally. So let's talk about solutions. Like, what have you seen? What have you experienced? Or quite honestly, what do I know you to actually be delivering on personally that's making a difference in this space?
Well, so before we go dive into the solutions specifically, I do want to make sure that we don't miss something that was shared like at the beginning. And that is, Errika, you mentioned in 1993, your professor told you that Black women, don't belong in engineering. Valarie talked about her experience and tried to throw in there that it was 10 years before mine, but but that's okay. I don't know the year, specifically, but what I do know is that in 2007, when about a year into my career in tech consulting, I had my career counselor, the person who was supposed to be my advocate for promotion and help to make sure that I, was able to effectively kind of find my way and my place, in this new career, told me that I was being too idealistic in, my desires to advocate for those whose voices were not going heard. And so this was, in 2007. And then I want to fast forward to today, 2021, where, thankfully, Hype is lucky enough to have amazing and talented college students who intern with us during the school year. And so we had an intern, a computer science major at the University of Georgia, intern with us this past spring. She received an internship for this summer with a company that's based in the Bay. And she is one of 12 interns and the only girl. And, she came back to me and told me that she, one, was so excited about the fact that hype exists for younger girls, for girls who are in middle school and high school, and that she had an opportunity to connect with them and create curriculum for them, because she understands how necessary it is not having that experience herself in grade school. But that even still, with working with hype for a semester, still felt intimidated in her internship, still felt like she did not belong, still, fought the feelings of, how do I speak up for myself? What should I wear? What should I say? How should I respond in different situations? And so, this problem that we're, discussing is many decades old. It still exists today. There hasn't been much change that has occurred in the past, 20, 30 years. And when we think about solutions, it has to be about more than just the education piece. It has to be about more than, making sure that students know how to code or being trained in math and science and computing. Because for women particularly, and we've all kind of talked about it ourselves, the problem in not being prepared for what's next is not that we did not have the training, right? It's not that we didn't have the technical training. It's that we might not have had conversations like we're having right now, where we were able to kind of think about and understand from those who've come before us what is going to be next, what we will encounter, and how we can thrive, in a world unknown to us. Graduating from college and going into a career is scary in and of itself, going into a new career, but staying prepared for the type of environment that you will and how you can make changes in those environments are the types of things that I do believe we should be, the types of conversations that I do believe we should be having with girls as young as middle and high school, because they can make differences even where they are today, and if they are being trained to be leaders, and if they are, understanding the unique perspectives that they have and learning how to advocate for themselves as well as others, learning how to be brave, if they're gaining these skills while they are in middle school and high school, then I do believe that they will be more prepared to do the same once they enter the workforce.
I want to add, with organizations like Hype. So I want to give Hype credit for exactly what we're talking about, Errika. You asked about the solutions, and I believe Hype and organizations like that have been the solution, right? Trying to put out the solution. So I know that Hype has had several programs where they've brought girls through, and they do learn how to code, and they're exposed to technologies that they probably wouldn't have been otherwise. And it's not just the fact that they come to an after school program or summer program, but the things that they learn are integrated with what they've learned in school. So it's not this total distinct separate thing. I think when we build these programs, that we have to think about that it builds onto the curriculum. So understanding what's happening in schools. So I've had the pleasure of partnering with Hype with her girls. And so middle school girls and high school girls, where they do the technical piece. And then as an organization, we come in and do like a leadership academy so that they're prepared. Like, you have the tech skills, and now you know how to technically make this stuff happen. Now what's going to happen when you get to that tech job, right? As Kristina alluded, you can have a tech skill, but then learning how to fit in that tech culture and that tech environment is another thing, and understanding that. And what I've noticed in working with these academies with girls, the questions are pretty simple, and it repeats in different groups. So whether like we're working with Hype, or whether we're working with the Urban League or Goodwill or the APS school or whatever, what I've noticed is some of the questions are the same, whereas is like, I didn't know about the polo shirt and khakis, that I didn't have to wear that. Right? It is, what do I wear when I go to a place? Like, is it okay for me to have my hair like this? How do I speak up if everybody sounds so smart in the room? Like, how do I respond to people when they treat me like I'm just a little kid all the time, right? How do I be authentically me, right? What is the balance of being authentically me and being able to fit into a culture so I don't present barriers for my success, right? And so it's all of those conversations weave together to give them the solution, but also, like I mentioned, working with the schools. I am such an advocate for not making this an additional thing, but working with the teachers, the administrators, the STEM directors to see if we can implement programs with the schools so that it's aligned and that our curriculum is going to be a boost. Like we get certification programs that are going to put them at a different place, right? So that solution where they already come out having something tangible, so they can go to that next step. So that's for me, helping them understand and being exposed and just being ready, whether that's with credentials that they got from going through a program or whether that's just understanding how to fit into that culture.
And I want to address one of the questions that has come up in the chat and tie this in and thread it into something that we discussed, amongst ourselves before coming to this forum around the social, emotional, mental aspects of this, right? Because to your point, Valarie, it's not just about coding. It is so much more than that. And also to your point, that's one of the great value adds about hype is that it's not just about coding. It's about being a female in the industry of coding. But let me give you the intangibles, right? Let me share with you what are the other aspects that you need to think about and be prepared and empowered with as you transition through this space. And to the question that's in the chat about building the right teams, that's an aspect that I would encourage you to think about. It's not just making sure you've got a certified teacher or instructor that can bring the core skills, but what are you also doing in building that team and ensuring that you are directing your energy towards the social, emotional, and mental aspects that will absolutely be a part of a young woman's experience in this space. In fact, to not acknowledge it would be, I won't say criminal, but it's in a big way being a disservice to the quality of the experience that you want to bring to these young women, because it is absolutely going to be an aspect of it. For anybody who had the opportunity last night to see Coded Bias or have seen it before, Joy talks in that documentary. This is a PhD student at MIT who, even in her massive skill, capacity, intellect, she knows that is irrelevant, unfortunately, when she has to defend, when she has to define, when she has to give the landscape of what's real. Why? Because she's deciding to push against a space that has been in an existence and created by white men since 1956. So who is she as this young Black female to come in and say otherwise relative to what are the biases that exist in artificial intelligence, right? So that's why we wanted to bring this conversation to bear, because we recognize that there's the skill aspect just to be competitive. But then beyond the skill aspect, there is the wherewithal, there is the emotional intelligence, there is the necessary capacity to know how to maneuver and navigate an environment that is still not 100% accepting of gender representation, equity and gender representation and talent in this space. So again, we recognize that it would be remiss when we're talking about social good. It doesn't get more pertinent and relevant from a social good perspective than to ensure that conversations are coming to bear to empower, again, as early as middle school. And here's why. It is statistically known, and all kinds of data exists that reflects the decision points that girls make around STEM trajectories in middle school by the time they get to middle school. And the reality is, the percentages that we don't catch, encourage, and empower at that point automatically creates a deficit and a decrease in the number of talented young women that could then go on to pursue STEM opportunities in high school, from a post-secondary perspective, and then from a professional perspective. They're having to manage to things like the imposter syndrome. They're having to manage to things like family members, family engagement, family environment that isn't supportive of these pursuits. They're having to manage to, yes, teachers who are not, even in 2021, of a position of truly recognizing and uplifting female talent in this space. So all of these, if we consider ourselves champions, change agent, and community leaders and or educators that are really dedicated to this space, this social, emotional, and mental aspect of this is so critical.
Right. So Errika, and I see a question in the chat, and I want to put that question back on you, right? The question is, what is the greatest connection you are finding that sparks the interest of our young women of color in technology? I want to add on to that. You have a very unique background because now you are sitting in the center of many organizations that have a goal of helping girls, underrepresented populations in the world of STEM. I know you executive director for TAG, Education Collaborative, which is focused on K through 12, right? And so, Community Foundation. So you have this great background of working in the ecosystem where people are trying to put forth initiatives that are going to help push us forward. What has been some of the programs that you've seen the best success? The things that really spark an interest, the things that are really tangible, that get girls on that path of saying, yes, this is what I want to do.
Sorry, wouldn't let me unmute the. Valarie, that's a great question because it's taken time and energy and just really trying to be intentional about one, paying attention to that, and then using that information to then encourage and inspire, quite honestly, funders to get behind these types of opportunities. So what I would say are the things that I've seen that generate great energy and spark are the things that allow a young woman to be their authentic self in this space, not something where they have to manufacture their interest and their energy, not something where they have to simulate, right, someone else's energy or perspective about this industry, but spaces and places that really allow them to find themselves within this industry. And when you concentrate your programming around that, allowing these young women to say, it is actually great and okay that I am a female, or a female identifying individual in this space, rather than having them to do all the other things that I mentioned, those tend to be the more successful, impactful, and quite honestly, sustainable programs. Hype is a great example of that, because from the standpoint of, even in Hype's short 4-year period, right, it has had the opportunity to evolve and grow like gangbusters in terms of just the draw, the energy, the ability to entice funders to want to commit to programming like this. And that's what I try to, last year during COVID, I spent practically a year trying to go against the grain and change the narrative, quite honestly, with funders from the perspective of, no, what you can't do is tell educators, in school, after school, out of school educators, what you can't do is tell them what type of programming is necessary. What we need to do is ask them what type of programming, what type of programming do they already know is pertinent, available, viable, and then empower them, give them the money to do it, rather than dictating what needs to be done. So there's this whole experience of learning how to listen and listen intently, and then try and encourage funders and a community of funders and champions to take that listen and learn and use it to the benefit of the greater good. Valarie, with Right Now Solutions, here again, right, like Hype, you were in a 4-year period, and let's be real, folks, for organizations, entrepreneurs, nonprofits to get past that 3-year chasm is tremendous. It's quite a significant milestone. And in your time frame, right, and working with workforce development, working with the Urban League, the NAACP, with goodwill, it's a recognition of, let me meet these students and these talented individuals where they are. And quite honestly, embolden them to have confidence in who they are and where they are. But to your question, that's what I try and convey with the funders that I work with, is we've got to do a better job of listening and then supporting and being partners, versus the power dynamic that has been in play for too long of telling and controlling and dictating what needs to be done, because that's how we've been unsuccessful, quite honestly. That's how we continue to create inequities, quite honestly. So.
And I see it in there, you get it, you see what they gravitate to. So after years of running programs like this, you're definitely the hands-on stuff. And I remember thinking before, what can I do that girls would be interested in? So we created a program where, we did fashion design, graphic design, fashion design via graphics. So how can they do that, or build things for 3D printing for girls? And let's talk about chemical engineering. So let's talk about hair products, because everybody cares about hair products, and how all those chemicals mix together and what careers you could do and all that. But then you come to a time where, I don't have to make this girl centric, right? Because girls and boys like the same stuff, right? So both of my kids like anime. A lot of kids like anime, regardless of girl or boy. It's sparking that kind of interest. And this generation likes to solve world problems. And I think just giving them world problems of, what to solve and how to solve this problem. Like, this is a problem. How do we get, cleaner air or better food? And they like solving those problems. And, even like you said, we don't dictate how you do it. This is a problem. These are technologies at your disposal. These are resources at your disposal. Let's see what you come up with. And then that helps inform us as an organization when we build curriculum for the next program and the next program, the things that spark that interest. And that's how we keep that going, is making sure we listen and we pay attention, and then go back to educators and say, hey, listen, these are the things that's working. These are the things that keep their attention for 90 minutes. These are the things that are going to help them grow. And, even it's not just about growing the kid. I know we had a program for the educators called The It Factor. And it's about, how do you display yourself as a role model to kids in your classroom while being an industry expert. So you want to connect with companies that are going to give work-based learning experiences. You want to have companies come in and be volunteers where they need to see you as an industry expert in this field to connect with you. So how do you have that thing that sits in the middle of industry and students, so that, you can help the system thrive? And Christina, I go back to you with all of the things that you're doing too, and the different topics that you're teaching. And it's not just for the girls, but I think for the educational system as well, right?
Yeah, it is. And, I'll go back to something that you said, Valarie, in terms of listening to the students, as well. I think sometimes we don't pay as much attention to what students are telling us, whether it be through a formal survey or through their response to what we're trying that isn't working. Students are talking to us. And one of the things that we do for middle school students specifically is, and for girls is they don't want to hear me talk for an hour. They want to talk to each other. They want to connect. They want to build community, and they want to do things with their friends. And so for, a program that we may offer that is, an hour and a half long after school, maybe about 20 to 25 minutes of that time is an instructor teaching new content or a new concept. The rest of the time is them collaborating with each other, solving problems, Valarie, to your point, working on projects that are fun, doing things that allow them to explore their creativity, anime, design, fashion, entertainment, and helping them again to form a positive association between what they can do, because they get an opportunity to actually do it. And so in our partnerships with schools, especially moving forward, as we're kind of learning and hearing more and more about schools' needs for professional development and culturally relevant or responsive curriculum and education, is helping schools, the schools that we partner with, learn how they can take the curriculum that we have and implement it into their program, their courses, their classrooms, so that it is available for everyone, not just girls, right? All of the students who they teach and work with. And it's less about the curriculum that we have and more about the approach that we take to education and curriculum, which is a student-centric approach.
So in that vein, ladies, I wanted to, it's kind of a segue from what you've been discussing, right? How do we, and it also actually goes back to an earlier question, how do we encourage and empower these young women, as early as middle school at a minimum, to think about how they are actually uniquely positioned to add value to this industry? I go back to coded bias, right? And the recognition of the lack of diversity and clearly inclusion that existed in the beginning stages and development of artificial intelligence. And Joy talked about, when she began studying this, her realization was it wasn't until she put the white mask on that the algorithm picked up the data points of her face. And this is long after organizations like Facebook and Google and major organizations were already putting tools and technology and working with our government, right? Long after this has already been occurring. Or let me put it in a very different term or perspective. When seat belts were first designed for cars, they were not inclusive of a woman's body type. That's been a while ago. But let me bring it to 2021. They just discovered, right, for the National Institute that studies, cars and traffic, and they do the accident, design work and that kind of stuff. They just realized that they are not using crash dummies that are designed with a woman's body type. Men and children, but not women. And that can make an impact, right? In the study and and that was just discovered in 2021. So how do we empower these young women to recognize the role that they play in creating inclusive opportunities when it comes to this industry. Alexa. Alexa didn't recognize a myriad of voices and distinction in voices when Alexa was first designed and created. These are commonplace examples, but what are other ways, right? In the classroom, through organizations, how do we help them to know that their voice, that there's agency for their voice,
Mhm.
and that their voice has value and has extremely relevant positioning in this industry?
Yeah,
I,
so
go
I
ahead.
just I just want to bring up one point about Joy's video. Joy is one of the we do something called She Is Me spotlights in our after school program. And Joy is one of the women who we spotlight for the work that she's done around, more inclusive technology. And so our girls get a chance to see how the facial recognition software did not recognize her until she put on a white mask, and how she just had to continue down that path because this was part of a grad school project. And so in order for her to get the data that she needed to actually do the research for her project, she had to wear this white mask. And it's something that, the girls were like, oh, that's unfortunate. Oh, that sucks. Like, that's, horrible. That's not fair. But then when we made it relevant for them, because in middle school or maybe even in high school, our students are not working on research projects to program, a robot at Georgia Tech, or MIT, but they are using Snapchat. They're using Instagram. They understand the concept of filters. And when we were able to help them make the association between what she was doing and the Snapchat filter, and they were able to even talk amongst each other around how when some of these filters first came out, it didn't recognize their face. Like the filter didn't work on them, but it worked on their friend. So when we were able to kind of share with them how this is literally the same thing that Joy was encountering, and then even take it further into the social justice impact that it can have when you think about, city government and police departments who are using the same facial recognition software, then they begin to kind of care and kind of perk up a little bit more and understand the importance of their voice, their perspective, their skin into development, and testing. And so I think one of the first things that we have to do as educators is take off the educator hat. You can't talk to them in these ancient, terms. You really have to make things relevant to them before they'll even begin listening and engaging in the main point of the conversation and the dialogue, which is them understanding the role that they play and the unique perspective that they offer to creating inclusive technology. And so I think that, sometimes if you're not aware of the trends in technology, then you're not able to make those connections for students.
Excellent point. I was just going to say, you have to be aware of what's happening, just like Joy. Like if you're not able to expose them to things that have happened, then you can't exactly open up the possibilities. So it takes examples like them for them to think through, well, what has impacted me that I thought should be a different way? Mm-hmm. I was listening to the summit yesterday, and somebody made a mention of Instagram being accessible. If you are deaf or blind, like what are the accessible things in Instagram? And until you are faced with a situation that you have to deal with, is not really relevant. So if girls think about the things that have impacted them, or they thought, okay, there's no way it should be like this. Like you all go all the way back to the seatbelt. Like somebody had to figure out this is not right. But we need to be on those teams. We need to have seats on those seats at those tables, or make that table and invite others to the table so we can make sure the solutions are in place to fit our needs. But it does start with us and making sure we are able to tell them about those things and expose them to it first, I think.
Yeah. And I'll also just add one other thing. This provides the perfect opportunity to also expose students to careers that might not be tech heavy, right? So that might not be the coding, part of a technology team, but it helps us to introduce other roles like being a product manager or being, a user experience designer or, like programming or creating the interface that someone will interact with, and then helping them to understand that there is creativity, there is psychology, there is empathy, there is art, and all of these things associated with technology and computer science, and understanding the computing part is just a small piece, and it may or may not be the role that you play, but it's a great place to start as you explore different other areas or arenas of the tech space.
No, I think you're spot on, Kristina, because I think, like you said, right, it's about it's about motivating them to go beyond being consumers of the technology to an identification of in what role can I play in being a producer of the technology. And that doesn't just have to be in the coding aspect of it, right? The psychological aspects behind the build and behind the design, behind the user experience, or even taking the critical thinking and the analytical thinking and the design process that they learn in a space like this, again, particularly at the middle school and high school ages. And then how do I translate that into perhaps something that they may be more passionate about, like criminal justice, like environmental justice, like social justice, like sustainability, right? When we think about amazing organizations like Gooder, right, and how she has transformed a whole food sustainability ecosystem, she will be the first to tell somebody that that is not her, that technology is not her first innate and primary skill set, but she was able to identify those who have the skills, and I'm talking about the founder of Gooder, right, those who have the skills, and then take her passion around sustainability and leveraging technology as a foundational element for bringing that to fruition, and has literally changed the game when when you talk about food sustainability. And so I think that's another aspect is when we talk about this whole meeting them where they are, right, and energizing them and encouraging them where they are, it's also just broadening the conversation for them and ensuring that you may start here, right? We're giving you elements and pieces, and we being, again, educators, community leaders, corporate partners, we're giving you elements and pieces right here, but this is not the only place you can go with this. It doesn't start and end here. This is literally just the beginning. And if anything, it's to help you give grounding and footing and motivation to see where you want to take it, wherever that might be, right? I look at my own career trajectory and think about that, right? Never in a million years did I think I would end in mission delivery or philanthropy specifically, because number one, I didn't know anything about philanthropy, right? 30 years ago, I had no clue. And studying at Georgia Tech in 1990, no clue what like somebody's paying for something, but whatever. It has nothing to do with me,
Right.
versus having had the lived experience in the technology industry to realize, oh, okay, boo, like if not you, then who, right? um you may have had a positive experience, but what you also know is not everybody has. That is not the experience for everyone. So what is your responsibility to make a difference? And that's what this is about. This is about giving grounding and footing to these young women, to encourage them to move forward and to go change the world. To decide, like Angela Davis, right, who has the quote that I love to death, right? I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. Empowering them to do that, right? So I know we only have a few minutes left, and we want to encourage questions to come in the chat. But while we wait for a question to come through, here's a question back to us, or Christina and Valarie, right? When you think about again, we started with this word ecosystem. So educators, community leaders, corporate partners, and the fun part is we've all three served in all three of these spaces. How should they be working together to create system change for the young women in this industry? My short answer to this is I need people to stop starting at the college college as a starting point. Because by then it's actually too late practically. Yeah. So that's my short answer to that question, is start much sooner and earlier. But Kristina, Valarie, what do you think?
So yeah, I agree with starting earlier, right? And with hands-on opportunities. So as companies, we can create opportunities for people to be exposed at an earlier. And it doesn't mean you have to do this whole summer internship, but a way to do a job shadow or an immersion program for a day or two, but something that exposes them to technology, to computing, and makes them aware, again, that you don't have to be the coder, but I think everything is technology based. Every company is a technology company. You mentioned Jasmine Crow, right, with Gooder, and the fact that she just wanted to feed people. Mm-hmm. Actually, I was a moderator for her fireside chat a couple of weeks ago, and she talked about her just interest of feeding people. But then that became a technology. You have to use it in order to scale. And that's the thing with everything. We do this program around esports, mm-hmm. and it's like the business of esports, right? So somebody has to create the game. Somebody has to play the game. Somebody has to go on social media and market the event. Somebody has to play in the event. Somebody has to recruit companies to donate. Somebody has to recruit players. So but you're still in the world of computing, even if you're not there. So giving them real world examples at companies to see what they can do is, I think, the way to start early is the exposure of, it's not just one thing. It is so many opportunities. I have a daughter myself, and I've been a huge advocate of girls in STEM forever and ever and ever, right? Girls in STEM, women in technology, WIC girls, all this. And then my daughter became of age and in middle school was like, I'm not really a STEM person. I'm like, what did you say to me? How could you say this?
Audacity.
Making me a fraud out here. But I had to get her to go to hackathons and things like that to say, okay, she didn't like building the drone like my son did. He wanted to build. She wanted to do the storyboard for it, right? Mm-hmm. And market it. And so that's the thing, like getting them to these hackathons, letting them see what exists beyond just the title.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, computing careers, they are the, fastest growing, highest paying, careers of the future. And I think that they're not the fastest growing and highest paying simply because of the tech aspect, but it is because regardless of industry, agriculture, sports, gaming, art, entertainment, regardless of industry, there is going to be a tech. We have to just acknowledge that there will be a technology like component and aspect to just about every industry that exists. And so I think that when we work together, we talk about partnerships. I think one of the things, and I'll speak to the educational partner piece, is educators. I would love to see more educators just be okay with not doing things the way that they did them, the way that things have always been done over the past, 5 or 10 years, because we are living in a different day and we're going into a different future. And so and I understand that there are many people who have, traditional educational training who might not know how to incorporate the innovation and the, creativity and other things into STEM culture. And that is where partnership comes to play. It's inviting corporate partners and other, nonprofit organizations and partners to work with you in your curriculum development, to work with you in how you recruit students into your STEM programs, and not, feel as if because we are suggesting something that's different or other than what you've done last year, or what you're used to or what you've seen, not to shun it away so quickly, but give it a chance. Work with other partners. I think we need to listen to one another, and really try new things. Because if we don't, then, I feel like we are doing our students a disservice, and we're not preparing them for what's next if we are stuck with, what was yesterday.
Yeah, there really has to be, when you talk about an ecosystem, it's a recognition that there are multiple entities, multiple parts, multiple partners that are part of successfully bringing the goal of that ecosystem to fruition. So the reason I started with that comment of I need us to step away from let's start with the college pipeline first is because even for corporations, right? We have more corporations that focus their energy on the collegiate aspect rather than recognizing the full continuum of the pipeline that exists, and quite honestly the role that they have to play in bringing more talent into that pipeline. By 2025 we will have over 2 million jobs positioned in the CS industry, and our current trajectory is only on target to have a little over 1 million, maybe. And that does not take into account the deficit that we're already starting to see through research, literally just because of 2020, right? So that being said, we will have unfilled roles, positions needed in an industry where we're not doing our part to continually build out a pipeline. Yes, nobody in elementary is going to impact the 2025 deadline, but the 2025 deadline will be residual if we're not making those decision points about elementary, middle, high school, and just point being again, before the collegiate aspect. So, and it just takes everybody that's in this, that plays their role, whether you're in school, after school, out of school educators, whether you're corporate leaders, whether you're community champions and change agents. It requires multiple voices coming to the table with the same goal of how are we going to successfully bring this ecosystem goal to fruition. And we don't talk about that enough. I'm just going to keep it real 100 right now, and particularly in some of our larger markets like Atlanta Metro. There's so much segmentation. There's so much, myopic views and perspectives versus synergy. And that would be, so I'm getting on a soapbox, yes. But I feel like we would be remiss not to draw that out, particularly since we only have a minute left anyway. So what you gonna do? Turn us off? But I want to put it out there as an encouraging statement in all seriousness to get us to a better place, to get us to a better point. And if we're talking about building a talent pipeline, what's the intentionality that we're going to bring to ensuring that young women are absolutely a part of that much needed pipeline, talent pipeline, from 2025 and beyond. So Kristina, Valarie, any closing 30-second remarks that you have before they turn off the lights and pull the plug on us?
I just want us to continue to encourage our girls, right? It's no one straight path. It's a journey. You can make your own. This world is broad. It's out there. We just got to encourage them to do it.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you so much for to the Constellations team for allowing us to have this conversation, because I do think that that is one of the first things that we can do, is to acknowledge the problems that do exist and to discuss in public forums like this things that we can do, Errika, as you mentioned, as an ecosystem to address those problems and bring about real solutions.
Yes. Thank you.
Were phenomenal. Like, I'm still over here taking notes, and I was like, oh, wait, talking to me. So this was awesome. I tried to put links that were relevant to what you were talking about in the chat. I thank you so much for sharing what's a part of my mission, and you're doing the work. You are doing the work and doing it well. So thank you, ladies, so much. To our audience, we have a 10-minute break. I wish we could just keep talking, but hop in. We'll do a hard stop sometimes. But we have a 10-minute break before the next session. Ladies, thank you again. Just kudos.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thanks, Yolanda. We appreciate you.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
So again, for the audience, there's a 10-minute break before the next sessions begin. To our panelists, if you missed this, or if there's something you want to see, just know that we will have these recordings on our Constellations YouTube page, and there are lots of points that are well worth reiterating. So see you in the next session.